This is Skip Hank, President and CEO of Xploration International. At Xploration 16, the Evolving Trends track was one of the best attended and most informative tracks of the event, as industry analysts and consultants focused on the trends and changing dynamics of the customer communications industry. Due to the popularity of the track, several of the analysts agreed to an encore performance and agreed to record their session from the event. One of the sessions we are presenting is Shaping the New Customer Engagement Opportunity by Kaspar Roos. Kaspar is the founder of Aspire CCS, a technology strategy firm specializing in enterprise customer communication transformations and customer engagement optimization. Prior to founding Aspire, Kaspar was Global Director for InfoTrends Production Software Services, providing technology, business, and market insights to clients active in the customer communications management, digital marketing, and media, and production workflow markets. Prior to InfoTrends, Kaspar was as Product Marketing Manager for Objective Loom. Kaspar holds a Master of Science degree in Industrial Engineering with specializations in Business Marketing, Information Systems, and Business Administration. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the podium over to Kaspar. Kaspar?
Thanks, Skip. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome to this presentation. So for the next 30-40 minutes, I'd like to talk about the customer engagement opportunity. So I think we're at sort of a very important crossroad in the CCM industry. I think we're at this time where the market is really fundamentally changing because of developments in the industry. Traditionally, CCM typically sat within the IT organization, more on the operations side, very heavily focused on cost reduction. And what we've noticed over the last couple of years is that this market is really rapidly changing and becoming much more oriented around marketing and helping marketers drive better customer engagement, improving the customer experience, creating more loyalty. We see that ownership of communications is really shifting away from the IT organization now more to the marketer side. And that presents enormous challenges both on the IT side, on the marketing side, but at the same time it opens up enormous opportunities as well. Whenever there's change, there's an opportunity to add value and to reduce complexity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this new engagement opportunity, and before that, let me spend a couple of minutes quickly introducing myself for those of you who don't know who I am. So here's the overview. So I used to work at InfoTrends as a global analyst focusing on the customer engagement area, leading that for quite a few years. But last year I decided to move on and to focus really on end-user consultancy. So previously it was more about doing research, listening to customers. In my new thing, I'm actively helping enterprises with developing strategies around customer engagement and omni-channel communications. I'm Dutch originally, as you could probably hear, but lived in London for 8 years, I'm traveled quite a bit, so I've got good understanding, I think, of the European market as well as the US market. So with that, let me basically start to give you a background of how CCM has evolved. So as I mentioned, CCM has been traditionally seen as a operational cost. It was clearly part of the IT organization, operations, and cost and risk reduction were the primary drivers of why people were actually investing in customer communications management software, as well as in investments from a staffing perspective or an operations perspective. So cost and risk reduction, primarily driven by regulations as well as cost reduction, very important here. It still is important, but what we've seen over the last couple of years, as I mentioned in my introduction, marketers are becoming much more involved and are taking over from an ownership perspective. And this causes challenges because the customer experience is typically defined outside of the CCM domain. So CCM professionals, they need to be more open to the rest of the organizations. They need to adapt themselves. And I'd like to spend a couple of minutes sort of talking about what are the key trends and the key drivers here, and sort of explain what is happening. So I think from a very overall perspective, it's the change in consumer behavior that's sort of driving this change. So let me dig into that. What does it mean, changing consumer behavior? So from an overall perspective, first of all, the consumer group, I mean, your customers typically are changing in the sense that the new generation is coming, called the millennials or the Gen Z generation, today's teenagers. The interesting thing about millennials and you know, the Gen Z generation is that they have grown up with the internet. And from research, we know that those people have completely different, you know, communication behaviors than older generations. So for instance, they're much more smartphone savvy, they like technology better, they expect instant communications. And also, very interestingly, where Generation X and Boomers, when they engage with a brand, their preferred way of doing that is actually picking up a phone and speaking to someone on a, you know, with a real human being. If you look at millennials, their preferred way of communicating is actually chatting, and the phone, speaking to people, is actually the number 4th choice for them. So it's completely different communication preferences, communication behaviors. But the scary thing is that within a couple of years, within 4 years from now, over 50% of the global workforce actually consists of people born after 1980. And it's a little bit tilted towards the emerging economies. There's a larger younger population out there, as you can see in the slide here, the yellow, the light blue bars. And it's in the U.S. It's a little bit higher than Europe. Europe has a little bit older generation in comparison, but generally speaking, overall, the trend is very clearly that, you know, the millennials are becoming much bigger as a group, and also are becoming your next generation customers. And beyond being just customers, they are actually entering the workforce, and that means that they have different expectations on how they actually work on the business side as well. So thinking about how you develop and create communications, how you engage with your customers, it could be that in a few years from now there's a completely different teams that need to be built to actually do that and enable that. So it's a very fundamental change that's coming, and 90% of marketers says that it is very important to market to this group with really well-developed content. So there's also this whole thing from a marketing perspective that organizations need to change themselves and need to become ready. So it's a big change that's happening, and this is a key driver of why marketing is looking at this and say, well, actually, we need to change our organizations, and we need to become ready to actually communicate to those customers in better and smarter ways. Another thing that millennials do, they're very online driven and very well connected. They use social media a lot, and this causes issues if you think about how brands actually differentiate themselves. So many brands, especially in really commoditized industries, so telecoms for instance, but also the insurance market, it's very easy to do price comparison, to get online reviews, and increasingly it's very difficult for them to really stand out. So if you basically looked at it, how companies traditionally would basically compete, it's sort of the top left-hand side triangle there. It's about service, it's about price and quality, and very often you could basically say, well, you can pick 2, but you can't pick 3. It's like if you have a, you know, a service or a product that is very good from a high quality perspective and got good customer service, then the price would be high and you can have a low price. Or if you have low quality and low price, then typically, you know, or you know, then the service could be low as well. And then, so there's a couple of those things where you can say you can pick 2 but not 3. What is changing nowadays is because price is becoming much more I would say, open. Everyone can sort of use their phone to look at prices and do comparisons. Quality is becoming sort of standardized, especially in commoditized B2C industries like telecoms, utilities, insurance companies. What is happening here is that customer service is becoming the key competitive differentiator in terms of how businesses actually, differentiate among themselves. And Gartner, they have a very interesting statistic there based on research that they did. They found that by 2016, which is now, 89% of companies expect to compete mostly on the basis of customer experience. So it's the far majority of companies are recognizing that customer service and customer experience is incredibly important, in terms of how they basically engage with customers. So it's this sort of shift in thinking that powers marketers much more to the foreground, and why marketing is becoming much more the driving lead here. So what we've seen in terms of IT spend, very clearly businesses are trying to rationalize existing investment, trying to rationalize more the integration and the back office and the plumbing of systems together. They're sort of trying to create cost savings there that it can pass on to the digital transformation teams and the customer experience teams to sort of have more investments to really make this customer experience business a reality. And this is another reason why marketers are actually getting in better and more spend that they can use to invest in solutions outside of the typical IT organization. So there's a big shift in terms of ownership, but also in terms of spending away from operations more to the marketing side. Well, what does that mean for customer communications management? From an overall perspective, omni-channel is becoming very important. Omni-channel here means you can actually start a conversation in one channel and then you can continue it in the next channel. So there's a little bit of a difference between multi-channel and omni-channel. Omni-channel is sort of the continuation of multi-channel. It's making sure that messages and communications are tracked across all touch points, so that conversations can really happen and customers can easily swap between or switch between channels. The other thing that is very related to omni-channel is a mobile-first strategy. Mobile is becoming very important here because it can easily link physical to mobile channels as well as a desktop to a mobile device. So it's this touch point that is a primary point for the younger generations, but also have a lot of benefits. So what we've seen is that many businesses have developed mobile strategies, but the challenge is they very often develop that themselves in natively, they programmed it themselves, and they're now sort of struggling with tracking that, embedding it in an overall omnichannel strategy. And this is where CCM comes in so nicely, is because most CCM vendors offer mobile output, HTML5, scalable, resizable output that can easily be integrated with mobile apps, and then you basically have the best of both worlds. So it's the desire for more dynamic content. That's another big change here. Having the ability as a customer to interact with the document that you get, the online information that you get. For instance, if you get your 401k document, that you can see how stock has performed, and that you can select a specific stock and see the performance of that particular stock, or credit card statements where you in an interactive way can go through the statement and the credit card. Another big requirement is personalization. It's been important for a long time, but in every survey it ranks very high. And it's personalization can happen in many different ways. It can happen across content. It can be personalization of channel. It can be based on your location. Again, mobile is very important there. But also timing, the different type of messages depending on the time of day. Especially with direct mail, it's been proven that actually the highest response rate you will get if you send your mailing out on a Tuesday. That's for some reason the best time of the week. If you leave it later, people are sort of getting ready for the weekend. On Monday, people are catching up and starting the week. So it's things like that that sort of pick the best time, personalization across those axes. And then finally, digital self-service is becoming important as well, having a portal strategy where customers can be in control of how and when they access communications. And it's very interesting because in the industry, very often people say that digital self-service is sort of a challenge for them because they enable those portals, they send out this, messages and reminders and text messages saying to customers, well, your statement is ready, and then they send them out and no one actually goes online to check on the statement, and therefore you lose a very important touch point. On the flip side, I would say that is a very inside-out approach where you look at, your benefits. If you take it or look at this from a customer perspective, a customer would love to be in control when he, or love to be in control and have the option to actually go online whenever it suits him or her. So if the customer doesn't go to your portal, it actually speaks of another problem, and it means that your content is not engaging enough, or your proposition is not engaging enough, or doesn't make it valuable enough for the customer to actually go there. So we see quite a number of businesses, the leading businesses are thinking about, well, how can we create better engagement strategies, in a sense that maybe we should have gamification approach, we can give people points for certain behaviors or for checking in, or it could be all kind of things that you can think through about how to actually attract people to your portal. But that's a sort of a different discussion. So it's important here to take an outside-in perspective, really think through what the customer wants instead of what you as a brand actually want to do. So those are sort of the key requirements, key things that are happening from a sort of customer experience perspective. And I would say those things have been going on for a couple of years now, and I think we're now getting ready for sort of the next level. I've called this customer engagement. I'm not 100% sure if that's the right term, but I think the point here is we are entering, I would say, an era of digital transformation. It's very clear that this is top of mind for many businesses, and what it means is it basically means that businesses are rethinking their entire business strategy based on digital transformation. And let me give you a couple of high-level examples here in various industries. So on the top left-hand side, you see the fintech industry. Those are startups focusing specifically on the financial services industry. For some reason, London is actually a leading fintech center. They actually get more spend there than the Silicon Valley area. This slide, sorry, the top there is clipped off, but what it said was investment dollars, or growth in investment dollars in fintech startups. And you can see that especially UK has seen a lot of money basically being poured into the fintech startup industry. And what those guys are doing, to give you an example, I think one of my really favorite examples is comes actually out of the US, and it's from Quicken Loans. They've developed a product that is called Rocket Mortgage, and what they do is they've really transformed the mortgage approval process and completely digitized the process. As a consumer, you can upload all your information, and whereas it's and what they've done, they've sort of created a system that mimics a professional human underwriter. So they've developed, I think, over 2 years, they had like 1,000 programmers working on that to really create a really sophisticated system there. But what they can do now, instead of a normal mortgage approval process can easily take weeks or months even, they've brought it back to under less than 10 minutes. And this gives them an enormous competitive advantage over some of the other companies out there that offer that. Another one is peer-to-peer lending and some other great examples there that impact and threaten the traditional banks enormously. So for the traditional financial services companies in the space, they really need to invest and focus on digital transformation to become ready for those changes and counter them and actually innovate themselves as well. Energy cost, solar cost, very rapidly decreasing. So what the dotted line means is that sort of grid parity. So what you can see in the next, all prices are low now, but in the next 5 to 10 years, it's expected that solar energy will be more than actually grid generated power, and it gives all kind of new threats to energy companies as well. Let me see telecom, bottom right-hand side, WhatsApp messages that are sort of, over the internet is enormous growth there. Text messaging is sort of leveled off. And then on the bottom left-hand side, the Internet of Things. I mean, this graphic here shows the number of connected devices. It's in the 35 billion range, so it's very rapidly growing. So here you can think of cars that basically get like onboard computers, fridges that will be, sold with sensors in there. And what will happen, wearables, watches, is that all those products can actually become channels. So it's a very scary thought to think about it from a CCM perspective. But on the other hand, it also enables the industry, to embrace those new things. I mean, if you think about it, if fridges, scales, whatever you have in your house, every product, when it gets a sort of, a Wi-Fi connection and becomes a sensor and it generates data, what industry out there is best equipped, to deal with high volume of transactional data and turn it into something that looks very valuable and is lots of information in there that can be used to be distilled into, I would say to take data and turn it into information. And I think the answer there is the CCM industry that is very well equipped to do that. It's been proven for many years, for decades. And I think this transition enables, or creates a lot of opportunity for CCM players in the space. So this model here shows, I would say, what digital transformation means. It's businesses redefining the business strategy, digitizing operations, and then redefining the customer experience. They're using IT to drive this. They've got marketing in charge to really redevelop the offering. And they need to think through about compliance rules, about risk. They need to mitigate, the way they're organized. They need to have good governance structures in place. They need to create new C-levels like a CXO, a Chief Experience Officer, or Chief Digital Officer. And this model here shows that from a CCM perspective, we basically are part of the right-hand side. If you look at customer experience, part of the customer experience is actually the last mile delivery of communications, and this is where CCM is going to and where the opportunity actually exists. So to sort of take that or make it more applicable to the CCM space, if you look at today's enterprises, typically they're very large. They consist of multiple line of businesses, and every line of business has their own, CCM infrastructure, the people in place, processes. So if you go to a large bank, they can have a retail organization that sort of creates all the bank statements. They could have a mortgage or a loans processing operation, or they could have maybe credit cards business or an insurance business. And if you are unlucky and you are sort of a single person that sits across multiple line of businesses, very easily you can actually get conflicting messages from a single brand. So what we need to do, or where the industry needs to evolve into, is sort of creating, I would say, a shared technical architecture, at least, and shared infrastructure, where you can really get a single customer view. And this is an aspiration. I mean, I don't think every composition system will be replaced by one Uber system, but if you can start tracking communications, you can at least conceptually work towards a model such as this. And the benefits are that you can fully track it, and you can have a real agile communication strategy in place. So how should this, or would this look like if I sort of position this in a technical diagram? So if you look at CCM, traditionally it was very much related to, I would say, high volume print output. And what has happened over the last years, it has sort of evolved more to an upstream position, where it sort of manages high volume of messages and documents, and it's sort of evolving now, I would, to more customer experience management. So in the future, whereas we say composition, in the next couple of years, very easily we could sort of, swap composition and replace it with experience creation, because that's sort of what sits underneath. But the way it works is that a typically doc composition vendor, they would integrate with either system of records from a CRM system or an enterprise resource planning, an ERP, an SAP system to get financial data or customer data. It can integrate with maybe customer profile information, channel preferences, content can sit in ERP or an ECM, enterprise content management systems like a Documentum or Microsoft SharePoint. Signatures are typically stored in there. It could be business rule systems. So there's this whole information management layer that typically document composition software basically integrates with. And then they basically take the data, they marry it with a document template or messaging template, and then they output it to static multi-channel communications or dynamic communications, as I mentioned. Then we have the structured, on-demand, and interactive process management components, with interactive being the very interesting one, because that enables businesses, marketers, line of business, to actually become enabled and to make document changes and to become owners of specific communication streams. So that's actually the biggest growth driver in the CCM industry so far. It's the CCM vendors, document composition vendors, very actively selling document editors that enable the business to take ownership. The problem is the more people sort of change documents, the more personalization happens, the more is sent out to end users. And what we need is an archive that stores everything, because whenever a customer calls up and the CSR needs to be able, and a call center employee, they need to be able to actually see what the organization has sent out. So storing everything in the archive is important. Traditionally, it was very costly to do it. Over the last decade, storage prices has come down massively, so the archive is becoming much cheaper and much more cost-effective to actually install and maintain. And then finally, customer self-service portals need to be part of that. And then the customer engagement component, what we see is that vendors are adding social media monitoring capabilities, analytics, to sort of understand what customers communicate, track it, understand it, and then they can use those insights to really close the loop and to improve the communication. So for instance, with social media monitoring, businesses can learn about how customers value communications. If things are unclear, they can pick up on that, and then they can use that to improve. So this sort of ecosystem is in my mind what CCM means and what it entails, and it provides huge opportunities to really focus on engagement and customer experience. So a couple of areas here where I see still some challenges or opportunities for further development. So in the next 2 years, I expect vendors to really focus on those areas. So one of them is actually the self-service portals. Many enterprises, they use homegrown software from a mobile or web development perspective. What we see is that those enterprises are swapping over to standardized web content management systems that now can integrate more easily with CCM systems. So that's an area of focus. Another area of focus is that many customer communication professionals are not really seen as fundamentally important for digital transformation. So many businesses are transforming their business, but they don't really give communications an important thought. It's sort of an afterthought for them. So they've redeveloped their communication. So take the mortgage example. So if you basically redefine your mortgage approval process and you change it from weeks or months to under less than 10 minutes, and then you go to your CCM colleagues and you say, well, we also need to change certain messaging and some certain documents, and then it will take them, let's say, 2 to 3 months to actually do that. It's sort of unacceptable for those guys. So the CCM function in enterprises, they really need to evolve. They need to become much more proactive and really sit together with those CX professionals and those digital transformation professionals to make the changes in reality. So it's a big change that is that's happening for many CCM professionals in large organizations. Another challenge is the rise of disparate marketing solutions, the rise of shadow IT, difficulties in tracking, So, CIOs are under a lot of pressure to actually enable marketers to use their own systems, but at the same time, those systems need to comply with an overall IT strategy and making sure that they're part of an overall tracking, strategy. So challenges around that area. Difficulties in predicting which channel to use into omni-channel conversation. That's another point that's often brought up when I speak to end users. Dealing with high amount of permutation because of business user enablement. So it's a very difficult proposition, but it's still where I believe the market is going, and over time, vendors, service providers, and end users will find answers to some of those problems. So to wrap up and to conclude, I think where we're going is to create what we say a customer engagement value cycle, where a business strategy is being redefined. Companies are looking for new performance metrics. So thinking about customer lifetime value or a net promoter score, new ways of measuring how customers actually rank customer experience. They're looking for implementation help and then to optimize. And I have a very short case study here to explain this a little bit in more detail. So I attended the Adobe Summit in Las Vegas early, when was it? I think it was in March, mid-March actually. And they had a UK bank called NatWest, a part of the Royal Bank of Scotland, and they presented a really interesting case study. So what they showed us was a onboarding process. And it's sort of reflected in the picture above. So a customer would sign up online, and then they've sort of implemented the strategy. Starting at day 2, they would send letters, welcome letters. They could do outbound contact. They at some point during the process later on, they would try to upsell, cross-sell, do customer satisfactions, and all those things. The interesting thing was that they actually used the phone as well as the desktop. So when the customer signed up, they were actually asking to take out your phone and make a picture of your passport because they needed the passport as part of the onboarding process. And then the phone would automatically scan that or make a picture and send it to NatWest that would use it in a very clever way. But the point I wanted to make is to really focus in on some of the cross-sell opportunities here, because for marketers, that's sort of where they are very interested in, and that's where the market is going. And the onboarding process is a very ideal, I would say, business process where CCM is really touching the marketing world. And so what NatWest had done, they basically they had 4 steps that I identified that I had to do. So the first thing that I did was they implemented what they call journey managers. Now, journey managers are actually people that are enabled to own a specific part of the communication. They call them journey managers. We would call them business users that are enabled through technology to basically communicate with end customers. So that was one thing that they did. The other thing they did was, if you think about what I said earlier about creating centralized tracking, they had 40 different systems for this specific onboarding process. And they try to, and what they did, they centralized everything through tracking. And the way they did it was they called it tag management. So every sort of communication, I don't know exactly how they did it, but they put a specific tag around the content, and they were able to track that. Then they were able to show that in a dashboard, and based on that, they could then start the optimization. And this is really interesting. So what they did was, based on real life performance, they could say, well, we can, and if I move back to the previous slide, they could say, if I go here at the top, you basically see that at day 30 there would be cross opportunities. So let's say the customer would log in, would visit the website. Now what they would do is they could identify, if they are a first-time buyer, they would put a personalized message there and say, are you a first-time buyer? If you click here, we can offer you an X% discount. For somebody else, they would say, well, we can offer you a personalized loan. So they could really tailor this. But then the testing thing, that is interesting. They can tweak the messaging a little bit and do an A/B test and see which one actually scores better based on real-time data. And that's what they did. So in the first half of 2014, they only had like 2 people that were doing that stuff, and they only put out 2 tests. I don't know what the size of digital analytics is. But they only did 2 tests, but by 2015, they hired another 48 optimization specialists, and they conducted another 398 tests. So you can see the massive growth in tests and in you know, upsell, cross-sell potential there. So there's a dramatic increase for NatWest here for this particular business process. And this is where I would say the CCM world is touching the marketing world, because you basically need to have all, you know, work together. Because if a customer then signs up for a specific product, you need to follow up with, like, you know, critical communications, maybe with you know, mobile communications and other communications. So what is happening here, really to wrap it up, is if you look at the latest technology developments in the space, you can really see that the market is moving more and more towards customer experience, customer engagement. So if you look at the adoption, batch composition is sort of in decline. You see interactive really getting to the top of the growth there. Dynamic communications is coming up, personalized video, journey mapping, cognitive computing, analytics, those type of things are coming. And that all speaks to technology to really help end users or understand how to better engage with their customers. So what does it mean for enterprises? It means, do you have a future-proof CCM strategy in place? Do you have the governance structures to make this work? But more importantly, do you have the strategy, the understanding of all the technology coming together? And think about technology, people, and processes to make this a reality. For outsourcers, it means, can you execute on those new requirements? There's a lot of new capabilities coming, data analytics, mobile, web, but more importantly, you all need to bring it together. I think onboarding, what I mentioned, is a very specific, interesting business process here, ideal for outsourcing, and also ideal for outsourcers to demonstrate their latest capabilities in this area. And actually, at the Explore conference, I had a couple of companies in the room that were actually doing things like this and already doing very advanced capabilities that I just discussed. So a lot of this stuff is still aspirational, but quite a bit of stuff is already there in terms of technology, and the leading companies are embracing it and are making it, you know, are using it for their advantage. And then finally, for technology vendors, is your software flexible and innovative enough to meet those new market needs? And are you able to compete against some of those, I would say, new competitors that are emerging? So mobile app platforms, you know, web content management vendors that are more and more acting like they are CCM vendors. So it's a new playing field that we're entering into, and it's sort of new rules of engagement. So it's very important for tech vendors to stay on top of their game as well. So with that, thank you very much for listening. If you have any additional questions or feedback, or you want to challenge me on things, feel free to you know, to give me a call or send me an email. Yeah, thanks again for listening. Skip, over to you.
Okay, Kaspar, thank you. I'd like to thank Kaspar for sharing his presentation, and I really invite you to contact him if you have any questions. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's a friend of the association, and you would do well to confer with him if you have any questions or, you know, require additional information. So once again, thank you, Kaspar, for agreeing to share your presentation with our community. And at this point, this concludes this Platinum Series webcast. Thanks all for attending. Thanks all for participating.